You're not the kind of woman a man like me would ever choose." Those were the words Adrian Whitmore never imagined would come back to haunt him. The entire restaurant went quiet as the Ruthless Mafia Don looked across the candlelit dining room and watched a room full of wealthy guests laugh at the woman standing beside table 7. Her name was Maya Carter, and she had spent years learning how to survive in places where people judged her before they ever knew her name. The marble floors of Whitmore Grand glowed beneath the golden lights. Crystal glasses reflected across polished tables, and every person inside knew exactly who Adrian was. He was the man whose presence could change the future of a business with a single decision. The man whose tailored black suits, calm voice, and cold expression made people lower their voices when he entered a room. But that evening, the most powerful man in Chicago was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Maya had arrived early for her shift, tying her dark apron, checking every detail before the dinner rush began. She knew the rules of high-end service. Smile. Stay professional. Never let a rude customer see your pain. She had heard every kind of comment before. Some people judged her because of her size. Others assumed they knew her story because of her appearance. But Maya had learned something her grandmother told her years ago. People can measure your body, but they can never measure your worth. She carried those words with her every day. That night, everything changed when Adrian's business partners arrived with their families for a private dinner. Maya approached their table with the same quiet confidence she gave every guest. She placed the menus down, answered questions, and made sure everyone had what they needed. But one guest, a wealthy socialite named Victoria Hale, looked her up and down and smiled with a cruel kind of amusement. "You're the waitress?" Victoria asked. Maya nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am. I'll be taking care of your table tonight." Victoria glanced toward Adrian, then back at Maya. "Interesting. I suppose everyone has a place in this world." The words sounded polite, but everyone understood the insult hidden beneath them. A few people laughed softly. Maya kept her expression calm, but her fingers tightened around the notepad in her hand. Adrian noticed. He had been watching from across the room, not because he cared about the comment, but because he was curious why Maya did not react the way most people did. She did not argue. She did not beg for approval. She simply took a breath and continued doing her job. "Excuse me," Victoria continued, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I was just wondering, does someone like you really believe a man like Adrian Whitmore would ever notice you?" The laughter that followed felt heavier than the silence before it. Maya looked down for a moment, not because she was ashamed, but because she was choosing not to give strangers control over her emotions. She gently picked up the empty glasses from the table and stepped away. But before she could disappear into the crowd, Adrian's eyes followed her. Something about the moment bothered him. He had seen people fight for attention, money, and power his entire life. Yet the woman everyone in the room underestimated was the only person who seemed completely comfortable with who she was. Adrian thought he understood strength. He thought it looked like influence, wealth, and control. But as Maya walked back toward the kitchen with her head held high, he saw something he had not expected to find in his own restaurant. Quiet dignity. And for the first time in years, Adrian Whitmore wondered if he had been looking at the wrong things all along. The morning after the uncomfortable dinner at Whitmore Grand, Maya Carter returned to the restaurant before sunrise, just like she had done every day for the past 2 years. The city outside was still quiet, the streets covered in a soft gray morning mist, but inside the restaurant every surface already reflected perfection. The silverware was polished, the tables were arranged, and the scent of fresh coffee filled the elegant dining room. To most people, Maya was simply another waitress preparing for another shift. But Adrian Whitmore could not stop thinking about what he had witnessed the night before. He sat alone in his private office overlooking the restaurant floor, staring through the glass walls as employees moved below. His entire life had been built on reading people. He knew when someone wanted something from him. He knew when someone was hiding an agenda. He knew when someone was afraid. But Maya confused him. She had been insulted in front of important guests, yet she never tried to gain sympathy. She never complained. She never used the moment to make herself look like a victim. Instead, she returned to work as if her dignity was something no one else could take away. Adrian was not used to that. In his world, people fought for recognition. They demanded respect. They chased power. Maya simply carried herself with a quiet confidence that seemed impossible to fake. Later that afternoon, Adrian walked through the restaurant while the staff prepared for another busy evening. His employees immediately became more careful when they saw him. Conversations became quieter. Movements became more precise. Everyone knew Adrian Whitmore expected excellence. When he reached the service area, he saw Maya helping a new employee who had accidentally spilled a tray of glasses. The young woman looked embarrassed and nervous, expecting criticism. Instead, Maya calmly helped her clean everything and whispered, "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you do after." Adrian stopped for a moment. Those words stayed with him because they sounded different coming from someone who had every reason to be bitter. Later, he called Maya into his office. She entered carefully, believing she might be questioned about the previous night. "Did you come here to apologize?" Adrian asked. Maya looked surprised. "For what, Mr. Whitmore? For what happened yesterday?" She paused. "I did my job. Some people decided to judge me. That belongs to them, not me." Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her. Most people would have tried to impress him. Maya was the first person in a long time who seemed completely uninterested in his approval. "Why did you not defend yourself?" he asked. Maya looked toward the window, where the afternoon sunlight touched the city streets below. "Because I have spent too many years trying to convince people who already decided not to see me. I would rather spend that energy becoming someone I am proud of." For a moment, Adrian had no answer. The man who had negotiated million-dollar deals and controlled powerful businesses suddenly found himself unable to respond to a simple truth. Maya Carter was not asking anyone to see her differently. She already knew who she was, and that was something Adrian Whitmore had never learned. As she left the office, Adrian remained silent, looking at the door she had just walked through. For the first time in years, he wondered if the people he had underestimated were the ones who understood life better than he did. The next evening, the atmosphere inside Whitmore Grand felt different. The restaurant was still elegant, still filled with soft music, warm lights, and guests dressed in expensive clothing, but something had changed. Adrian Whitmore had started noticing things he used to ignore. He noticed the employees who arrived early. He noticed the people who stayed late. He noticed the quiet efforts that kept his empire running while he sat in an office believing everything happened because of his decisions. And more often than he expected, he noticed Maya Carter. Maya never tried to stand out. She moved through the restaurant with patience, remembering guests' preferences, helping her co-workers, and treating everyone with the same respect whether they were wearing a designer suit or a simple uniform. Adrian watched from a distance, trying to understand why her presence bothered him so much. It was not because she was a problem. It was because she challenged everything he believed. Adrian had spent years surrounding himself with people who wanted something from him. Compliments, opportunities, connections, approval. Everyone seemed to measure his value by what he owned. But Maya seemed to measure value differently. She looked at actions, not appearances. That afternoon, Adrian discovered something that changed the way he saw her. A supplier had delivered the wrong inventory for the restaurant's weekend event. Several managers were frustrated because the mistake could create unnecessary problems. While everyone searched for someone to blame, Maya quietly reviewed the order sheets. She noticed a small detail that others had missed. The issue was not the supplier. The problem came from a scheduling error that happened before the order was even placed. She brought the information to the manager respectfully, without embarrassing anyone involved. Within minutes, the confusion was resolved. Adrian had watched the entire situation from the hallway. He expected someone to take credit. He expected someone to point fingers. Instead, Maya solved the problem and walked away. "You do not like attention, do you?" Adrian asked when he found her later. Maya looked up from the table she was preparing. "Attention is not always the same as respect, Mr. Whitmore." Her answer surprised him. "What is the difference?" Adrian asked. Maya placed a glass carefully on the table. "Attention disappears when people find something new to talk about. Respect stays because of what you do when nobody is watching." Adrian remained quiet. Those words reached a place inside him that success never had. For years, he had believed respect came from authority, from being the person everyone listened to. But Maya had built respect without demanding it. Later that night, Adrian reviewed documents about his restaurant operations. For the first time, he was not only looking at numbers. He was looking for the people behind them. And when he saw Maya's name in several customer appreciation notes from previous months, he realized something uncomfortable. The woman everyone had underestimated was one of the most valuable people in his entire organization. The same woman he had silently judged from across the room was the person showing him a lesson he never learned from wealth, power, or success. But Adrian still did not know the full truth about Maya Carter. He did not know that behind her quiet smile was a past she had carefully hidden. A past that would soon force him to question everything he thought he knew about her. The following week, Adrian Whitmore found himself returning to a question he had avoided for years. How much of a person could he truly understand from a single glance? For most of his life, first impressions had been enough. In his world, appearances often came with expectations. Expensive clothing suggested influence. Confidence suggested success. Silence suggested weakness. But Maya Carter had quietly proven every assumption wrong. The woman he once overlooked had become the person he noticed most. One rainy afternoon in Chicago, Adrian arrived at Whitmore Grand earlier than usual. The restaurant was preparing for a private business meeting, and employees moved quickly to make everything perfect. As he walked through the kitchen area, he heard a conversation between two younger employees. They were discussing Maya, not with criticism, but with admiration. One of them mentioned how Maya had helped pay for a co-worker's certification course when she learned he was struggling to continue his education. Another explained how she always stayed a few minutes after her shift to help new employees feel comfortable. Adrian stopped walking. He had built an empire by studying numbers, contracts, and strategies, but he realized he had never studied the people who made his success possible. Later that day, he asked the restaurant manager about Maya's background. The manager hesitated before answering. Maya does not talk about herself much, Mr. Whitmore. Why? Adrian asked. Because she believes actions matter more than stories. That answer stayed with him. But Adrian wanted to know more. Not out of suspicion, but because for the first time in years, he was genuinely curious about someone. When he reviewed her employee records, he discovered something unexpected. Maya had not always been a waitress. Years earlier, she had graduated near the top of her class with a degree in hospitality management. She had studied business operations, customer experience, and restaurant development. She had once dreamed of managing her own restaurant. But after her family faced difficult circumstances, she stepped away from that dream to support the people who depended on her. Adrian stared at the information on the page. The woman he had seen carrying plates and serving tables had once been preparing for a completely different future. Yet she never used her past to demand sympathy. She never mentioned her achievements to gain attention. She simply worked. That evening, Adrian found Maya organizing supplies before closing. You studied hospitality management, he said. Maya looked surprised. Yes, a long time ago. Why did you stop? She paused for a moment before answering. Sometimes life asks you to take a different path. That does not mean the first dream disappears. It just means you learn from where you are. Adrian looked at her carefully. There was no bitterness in her voice. No anger. Only acceptance. You could have been running a restaurant by now, he said. Maya smiled slightly. Maybe, but I learned something important. A title does not make someone valuable. A person brings value wherever they stand. For a man who had spent his entire life chasing titles, ownership, and influence, those words felt different. Adrian had always believed success was measured by how far someone climbed. Maya showed him another possibility. Maybe success was also measured by how many people became better because you were there. As Adrian watched her leave the restaurant that night, he realized something that unsettled him. He was no longer seeing Maya Carter as an employee. He was seeing her as someone whose strength came from a place he had never understood. And soon, the entire world around Adrian would discover the same truth he had just begun to see. For the first time in many years, Adrian Whitmore invited someone into his office not because he needed something from them, but because he wanted to understand them. The room that once felt like a symbol of power now felt strangely quiet. The dark wood shelves, the expensive furniture, and the city view through the large windows had always represented control. But that evening, Adrian realized control had never helped him understand people. Maya Carter sat across from him with the same calm expression she carried everywhere. She was not intimidated by the luxury surrounding her. She was not trying to impress him. She was simply waiting for him to speak. You know, you could have told people who you really were, Adrian said. Maya looked at him with curiosity. What do you mean? Your education, your experience, the things you accomplished before working here. Maya lowered her eyes for a moment, thinking carefully about her answer. Why would I? She asked softly. Adrian paused. He was used to people announcing their achievements before anyone had the chance to question them. Because people would have treated you differently, he replied. Maya gave a small smile. That is exactly the problem, Mr. Whitmore. If someone only respects me after learning what I have achieved, then they were never respecting me. They were respecting a title. Her words stayed in the room. Adrian had spent years surrounded by people who measured everything by status. A person's value came from their company, their money, their influence, or their family name. But Maya seemed to carry something he rarely saw in powerful people. Peace. You really believe that? He asked. I do, Maya answered. Everyone deserves respect before they prove anything. A person should not have to earn basic kindness. Adrian looked away toward the window. Those words were simple, but they challenged everything he had accepted as normal. He remembered the night at the restaurant when Maya had been humiliated. He remembered standing there, watching, saying nothing. The realization bothered him more than he expected. He had not been the person who insulted her, but he had allowed the moment to happen in a place that carried his name. For someone like Adrian, who believed responsibility belonged to those in charge, that truth was difficult to ignore. I owe you an apology, he finally said. Maya looked surprised. For what? For seeing you as everyone else did. For assuming I already knew your story. The room became silent. Adrian Whitmore was not a man who apologized easily. People usually waited for him to give orders, not admit mistakes. Maya studied his expression and noticed something different. There was no pride, no performance, just honesty. Thank you for saying that, she replied. But the important thing is what you do after realizing it. Adrian nodded slowly. He understood. Words were easy. Change required action. The next morning, Adrian arrived at Whitmore Grand earlier than usual. He walked through the restaurant, not as an owner inspecting his business, but as someone finally paying attention. He noticed the employees who worked quietly behind the scenes. He listened to concerns he had ignored before. And when Maya entered the room, carrying the same quiet confidence she always had, Adrian saw her differently. Not because she had changed. She had never needed to. He was the one who finally learned how to see her. The days that followed brought a change that everyone at Whitmore Grand could feel, even if nobody could explain it. Adrian Whitmore was still the same man on the surface. He still wore his tailored suits, still walked into meetings with the confidence of someone who had spent years making difficult decisions, and still carried the quiet authority that made people pay attention. But something inside him had shifted. He no longer looked at his employees as names on a schedule or numbers on a report. He started seeing the people behind the work. And more than anyone else, he noticed Maya Carter. One afternoon, Adrian reviewed the plans for a major expansion of Whitmore Grand. The project was important. Millions of dollars were involved, and several experienced consultants had already given their recommendations. But something felt incomplete. The plans looked perfect on paper, yet Adrian sensed they were missing something. He remembered Maya's ability to notice details others ignored. So instead of calling another executive, he asked for her opinion. When Maya entered the conference room, several managers looked surprised. They were not used to seeing a waitress sitting at a table where major business decisions were discussed. Adrian noticed the hesitation in the room. A few people exchanged uncertain looks, silently questioning why she was there. But Maya remained calm. She opened the documents and carefully studied the information in front of her. After several minutes, she pointed to a section of the proposal. I think there is something missing here, she said. One of the executives smiled politely. With respect, Maya, this was reviewed by professionals. Maya nodded. I understand. But sometimes the people closest to the experience notice things that numbers do not show. Adrian listened carefully. He had heard similar confidence from experts before, but Maya's approach was different. She was not trying to prove anyone wrong. She was trying to make something better. She explained that the design focused heavily on luxury, but overlooked the guest experience. She mentioned small details about service, comfort, and human connection that could influence how people remembered the restaurant. The room became quiet, not because she demanded attention, but because everyone realized she had a point. Adrian looked around the table and saw something he had never expected. The people with the highest positions were taking notes from the woman they had once ignored. After the meeting, Adrian walked with Maya through the empty dining area. How did you learn to see things like that? He asked. Maya smiled softly. By paying attention. When you do not have the loudest voice in the room, you learn to notice what everyone else misses. Adrian stopped for a moment. That sentence stayed with him. He had spent his life making sure people listened to him. Maya had spent hers learning how to listen, and somehow, that made her one of the strongest people he had ever met. Later that evening, Adrian looked at the final revised proposal. The changes Maya suggested improved the entire concept. But the most important change was not written anywhere in the document. It was the change happening inside him. The man who once believed respect came from power was beginning to understand that true influence came from recognizing value in others. Yet Adrian still had no idea that the world outside Whitmore Grand was about to challenge everything he had learned. Because soon, Maya's past would no longer remain a secret, and everyone who had judged her would finally discover the truth behind the woman they underestimated. The truth about Maya Carter was about to step into the light, and Adrian Whitmore was about to learn that the woman he once underestimated had been carrying a story far greater than anyone imagined. The morning began like any other at Whitmore Grand, with employees preparing the restaurant for another busy day. But this time, the atmosphere felt different. A group of investors arrived to review the progress of Adrian's expansion project, and among them were several people who had known Maya before she ever wore a waitress uniform. Maya was organizing the service area when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Maya Carter?" She turned around and saw a woman she had not seen in years. Her name was Evelyn Brooks, a former colleague from Maya's early career in hospitality management. Evelyn looked surprised, almost unable to believe what she was seeing. "I heard you were working here, but I never expected." She paused, looking around the restaurant. Maya understood the unfinished sentence. She had heard it before. People were always surprised when they discovered that her current position did not represent her entire story. Before Maya could respond, Adrian approached. He noticed the change in her expression and immediately sensed that this was different from any conversation he had witnessed before. "You two know each other?" he asked. Evelyn smiled. "Maya was one of the most talented people I ever worked with. She was the reason our previous restaurant project succeeded." Adrian looked at Maya, surprised. He already knew she was intelligent, but he did not know the full extent of what she had accomplished. Evelyn explained how Maya had helped redesign customer experiences, improve operations, and create systems that increase satisfaction among guests. She talked about Maya's ability to understand people, not just business. But then her expression softened. She left everything behind when her family needed her. The room became quiet. Adrian looked at Maya. For the first time, he understood that her journey was not about failure. It was about sacrifice. Maya had not lost her dream. She had chosen to put someone else's needs before her own. Later that afternoon, Adrian found her outside the restaurant during her break. "Why did you never tell me?" he asked. Maya looked at him calmly. "Because I did not want you to see me differently because of what I used to be." Adrian nodded slowly. "And now?" Maya looked toward the city streets filled with people moving through their busy lives. "Now I hope people understand that someone's current situation does not define their entire story." Adrian thought about the first night he saw her. He remembered the judgment in the room. He remembered the silence when she was treated unfairly. And he remembered that he had been watching without truly seeing. But now, everyone around him was beginning to see what he had finally understood. Maya Carter was never someone who needed to become valuable. She had always been valuable. The only thing that changed was that people finally stopped looking at the surface and started seeing the person beneath it. And for Adrian Whitmore, that realization was only the beginning. The next chapter of Maya Carter's journey began with something she never expected: recognition. Not the kind she had chased years ago, and not the kind that came from a title or a position. It was the kind that came when people finally understood the person behind the work. At Whitmore Grand, the atmosphere had changed completely. Employees who once only knew Maya as a waitress now saw her as someone whose ideas shaped the future of the restaurant. Managers who once overlooked her opinions now asked for her perspective. But the biggest change was Adrian Whitmore. The man who once believed power meant standing above others had started learning what it meant to stand beside them. The expansion project moved forward, and Adrian made a decision that surprised everyone. He invited Maya to join the leadership team responsible for the new locations. When the announcement was made, the room became silent. Some people looked uncertain. Others looked impressed. But Maya simply stood there, calm and composed. She did not celebrate because she had finally gained a higher position. She celebrated because someone had finally recognized what she had always carried within her. After the meeting, Adrian found Maya looking over the city from the restaurant balcony. "You are not nervous?" he asked. Maya smiled. "I am nervous, but I have learned that fear does not always mean you are not ready." Adrian looked at her thoughtfully. He remembered the person she had been on that first night, standing quietly while others judged her. He realized something important. Maya had never needed his approval. She had never needed anyone's permission to be capable. She had always known her own worth. "I owe you more than an opportunity," Adrian said. Maya turned toward him. "What do you mean?" "I spent years believing people had to prove they deserved respect. You showed me that respect should come first." For a moment, Maya said nothing. She could see that Adrian was not saying those words because he wanted to appear different. He was saying them because he truly believed them now. Later that week, Adrian attended a private business gathering with investors and industry leaders. Many of the same people who had once judged Maya were there. They remembered her only as the waitress from Whitmore Grand. They did not know about her experience. They did not know about her ideas. They did not know how much she had contributed. But Adrian did. When the discussion turned to the future of the company, he did not present Maya as an exception or a surprise. He introduced her as a valuable member of the team. "The best decisions are not always made by the loudest voices in the room," Adrian said. "Sometimes they come from the people who pay attention when everyone else is distracted." The room became quiet. The same people who once measured Maya by her appearance were now listening to her ideas. And Maya stood there with the same confidence she had always possessed. She did not need revenge. She did not need to prove anyone wrong. Her success spoke for itself. Adrian watched the moment unfold and understood the lesson that had taken him years to learn. True leadership was not about making people look up to you. It was about having the humility to recognize greatness when it stood right in front of you. And for the first time, Adrian Whitmore was not trying to become more powerful. He was trying to become a better man. Months passed, and Whitmore Grand became known for something greater than luxury. It became known as a place where people were valued. The change did not happen overnight. It happened through small decisions, quiet moments, and a different kind of leadership. At the center of that transformation were two people who had once stood on completely different sides of the same world. Adrian Whitmore, the man who once believed respect came from power, had learned that respect was something given through understanding. Maya Carter, the woman who had been judged before anyone knew her story, had shown everyone that dignity was never determined by appearance, position, or the opinions of others. One evening, Adrian walked through the restaurant after closing hours. The lights were softer, the tables were empty, and the noise of the busy city outside felt distant. He remembered the first time he had seen Maya standing in that same place. Back then, he saw only what everyone else saw. A waitress, someone he assumed he understood. But now he saw the truth. He saw a woman who carried strength without needing to announce it. A woman who helped others while carrying her own struggles quietly. A woman who changed the way he viewed the world. Maya joined him near the entrance of the restaurant, holding a folder with the latest plans for their upcoming projects. "You know," Adrian said, looking around the room, "I used to think this place was successful because of everything we built." Maya smiled. "And now?" Adrian looked at the employees preparing to leave for the night. "Now I think it is successful because of the people who built it with us." Maya nodded. That was the difference between the man he used to be and the man standing beside her now. Adrian had not changed because someone forced him to. He changed because someone showed him another way to see people. A few weeks later, Whitmore Grand hosted a special event celebrating the employees who had contributed to the restaurant's growth. Maya stood among them, not as someone who had been given a chance, but as someone who had earned trust through years of dedication. During the event, Adrian stepped onto the stage. Everyone expected a speech about business, success, and future plans. Instead, he spoke about something much simpler. "For a long time, I believed people had to prove their value before they deserved respect," he said. "I was wrong." The room became silent. Adrian looked toward Maya. "The person I underestimated taught me the most important lesson of my life. A person's worth is not measured by what others see first. It is measured by the character they carry when nobody is watching." Maya lowered her eyes with a quiet smile. She had never wanted to be admired. She had only wanted to be treated as a person, and that was exactly what she had always deserved. Years later, People would remember the story of Adrian Whitmore and Maya Carter not because of wealth, status, or success. They would remember it because a man who had everything learned from someone the world had overlooked. The woman who was once judged by strangers became the person who changed an entire empire. And that day, everyone remembered the truth that had been there all along. Dignity does not come from what the world gives you. Dignity comes from knowing your worth before anyone else recognizes it.